It all started on a Tuesday evening. Nothing particularly special, just an ordinary night like any other. My wife, Grace, and I had been together for nearly a decade. But the years had begun to blur together, and the cracks that had formed between us seemed like they were hidden under a thick coat of routine. Life felt predictable. At first, that was comforting, but over time, it turned suffocating. I had my own doubts about us, of course. I'd been noticing the distance growing between us for months, maybe even years, but I refused to acknowledge it. You know how it is. You tell yourself things are fine, even when your gut is telling you otherwise. Maybe I was afraid of confronting the truth, or maybe I was just too tired to fight for something I wasn't even sure I still wanted. But one night, I overheard something that made me realize the truth wasn't something I could ignore anymore. I was in the basement, sorting through some old boxes. We'd recently moved some things around, and it was the first time in a long while that I found myself digging through memories of our past. Old letters, photos, even some things that I'd forgotten about. As I was about to move a box of dusty old books, I heard her voice. It was faint at first, almost like a whisper, but I could make it out. Grace was upstairs, talking to someone on the phone. "I don't even know why I'm still with him," she said. "He's useless. I'm tired of carrying everything. I just can't anymore." I felt my heart stop. I froze in place, every muscle in my body tense. Those words, useless. The coldness in her tone made it sound so final. The woman I had spent nearly a decade with, the woman who I thought I was building a future with, had just casually referred to me as useless. At that moment, I felt everything inside me crack wide open. The frustration I'd been suppressing for so long surged to the surface, but it was different now. It wasn't just about being hurt. It was about the realization that I had been living in a version of our marriage that wasn't real. I had been lying to myself, pretending that things were okay. All the while, Grace had been silently resenting me, perhaps for much longer than I realized. The silence that followed her words was almost unbearable. I stood there, in the basement, my mind racing. I wanted to storm upstairs, confront her, shout, cry, demand an explanation. But I didn't. I stayed still, almost as if I couldn't move. What was the point? She continued her conversation, oblivious to the fact that I had just heard everything. "I don't think I love him anymore," she added, almost casually. "I don't know if I ever did. It's like I'm just going through the motions now." That was it. The final straw. My breath caught in my chest. The truth hit me like a wave, and I suddenly felt sick. It wasn't just that she didn't love me. It was that I had been too blind to see it. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. And I wasn't the man I used to be, either. I walked out of the basement without making a sound. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not in that house, not with her in it. I grabbed my jacket, threw it on, and headed for the door. She called out, "Where are you going?" But I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. The night was cold, the kind of cold that cuts through your bones. But it was the kind of cold I welcomed, a physical manifestation of the emptiness I felt inside. I didn't know what I was running from, but I knew I couldn't face her right now. Not after what I'd heard. I needed to breathe, to get away, to think. I found myself at the park, sitting on a bench, staring at the empty playground. Everything felt surreal. The sound of the wind was the only thing I could hear. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I instinctively checked it. It was a text from Grace. "Where are you?" it read. "Please come home." For a moment, I considered replying. I thought about telling her everything I'd overheard, confronting her about what she'd said. But then I realized something. This wasn't just about what she said. It was about something deeper. I had spent so long trying to be the perfect husband, trying to meet her expectations, to fix things when they were broken, but I'd ignored the reality of what had been happening between us. I wasn't angry at her, not yet. No, I was angry at myself for allowing things to get this far. I was angry at myself for not listening to the signs, for staying too long in a relationship where I was no longer valued. I had spent years feeling like I was walking on eggshells, trying to keep everything together while she silently pulled away. And I had allowed it to happen. As I sat there, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living in a marriage where I was considered useless. I deserved more than that. I deserved someone who saw me for who I truly was, not just the person who existed to fill in the gaps. I stood up from the bench, my mind made up. The truth had been spoken, even if I wasn't the one who said it. It was time to walk away, to take control of my own life for the first time in years. The messages from Grace kept coming in, one after the other, but I ignored them all. As I walked down the empty street, I realized that I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking toward a version of myself that I had forgotten existed. A version of me who didn't need to be defined by someone else's expectations. By the time I got home, Grace was waiting at the door, her face full of concern. But I didn't care about her concern anymore. I didn't care about any of it. "I overheard you," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "No more lies, Grace," I said, the words coming out like a breath I had been holding for far too long. "I heard everything you said, and I'm done. I'm done being your option. I'm done pretending that I'm not the problem. But I'm not going to be the solution to your unhappiness anymore." Her face turned red with shock. She stumbled over her words, trying to beg me to come back inside, to talk it through. But I didn't need to talk. I didn't need to fix things for her. I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. That night, as I lay on my couch, I realized something. Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. Sometimes it's the only way to start over. I didn't expect it to feel like this. The silence was overwhelming. I stood in the hallway, listening to the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the distant sound of cars passing outside, but all of it felt empty. Grace had gone quiet. She was probably standing by the door, waiting for me to come back inside, to apologize, to beg for things to go back to normal. But I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. The reality was settling in fast. I had left the house without any intention of returning. I had walked out, and the weight of that decision felt both terrifying and freeing at the same time. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't going anymore. Back into that house. Back into that life. The life where I was invisible, where I had become the shadow in the background. A husband who didn't matter, a man who was barely noticed. I had spent years trying to fix things. I was always the one making sacrifices, compromising, doing whatever I could to keep the peace. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I forgot what it meant to be me. Grace had stopped seeing me as her partner, and I had allowed it. I had allowed myself to become just another piece of the furniture, a fixture in her life that was taken for granted. But not anymore. I couldn't go back to that. I ended up in a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place that didn't get much attention. The kind of place that felt like it was stuck in time. The booths were old. The air smelled faintly of coffee and frying food, and the waitress was the same one who had served me a year ago when I came here with Grace. But this time, I wasn't with her. I was alone. I ordered a coffee, the bitter kind that made my eyes water. I needed something to numb the gnawing emptiness in my chest. I sat there, watching the steam rise from the mug, trying to think clearly, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Grace again. A flood of texts. "Please come home. I'm sorry. We can talk about this." But there was no apology in her words. It was the same manipulation, the same desperate plea for control. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for ignoring her. I didn't feel like I had to be the one to fix everything. I knew she was confused. She probably thought I was just upset, that I'd calm down and return home like I always did. But I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after hearing what she really thought of me. Not after realizing how little I had meant to her for so long. The waitress brought my coffee, setting it down in front of me with a small, curious smile. She probably wondered why I was sitting alone at a table, staring at my phone like it was a lifeline. Maybe I was looking for an answer that didn't exist. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was the beginning of something bigger than just a fight. This was the beginning of me finally standing up for myself. As I sipped the coffee, I thought about my life with Grace. The way we used to be. I could remember the first few years, the excitement, the passion, the connection we had. But somewhere along the way, that spark had faded. She had changed. I had changed. And we had stopped growing together. We had stopped being partners. But now that I was on my own, I could see things more clearly. I had spent too long clinging to the hope that things would get better on their own. I thought that if I just worked harder, tried harder, maybe it would all turn around. But that wasn't the answer. It wasn't about what I could do for her. It was about what I was willing to do for myself. I set my phone down, letting the silence settle in. There was no point in responding to her anymore. I was done with the games, done with pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of a marriage that was already dead. And that's when I made my decision. I would never let her see me as weak again. I would never let her reduce me to useless. I wasn't her project to fix, her problem to solve. I was my own person, and I would find the courage to stand up for myself, no matter what it took. As I paid the bill and walked out of the diner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. It wasn't the hope that everything would work out with Grace, but the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could start over. Maybe I could rebuild my life, this time with me at the center of it. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, I could live for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't go back to the house that night. And the following days, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years: living on my own terms. It felt strange, liberating even, but also disorienting. For so long, I had been living for her, for us, always compromising, always bending to make sure she was happy. But now, there was nothing holding me back. The first morning after I walked out, I woke up in a small, rundown motel. The kind you don't care about when all you want is a place to sleep, somewhere to escape the noise in your head. I didn't need anything fancy. I didn't even care if it was clean. All I wanted was space. The weight of everything that had happened over the past few days still lingered. I couldn't shake the image of Grace's face when I left, the way she must have looked at me, probably thinking I'd be back soon. But I wasn't. Not this time. I spent most of the day driving around, aimlessly, letting my mind wander. It was funny how quickly the world felt different when you weren't attached to someone else's expectations. I hadn't realized how suffocating it had been. The constant need to prove myself, to make things right, to be someone I wasn't for her. All of that was gone now, replaced by a strange sense of freedom. But then the messages started again. "Where are you? Please talk to me. This isn't you." They were flooding my phone, one after another. I didn't respond. The silence was deafening, but it was the only thing that gave me clarity. It wasn't that I hated Grace. In fact, part of me still loved her. I wasn't completely void of feelings. But the truth was, I had spent years looking the other way, ignoring the signs, believing that if I just kept trying, things would get better. But they didn't. They only got worse. That evening, I found myself at the edge of a lake, sitting on the cold stone bench, staring at the water. The world felt like it was on pause. The ripples in the lake seemed to reflect the turmoil inside me. There was a part of me that wanted to go back, to fix things, to apologize, to act like none of this had ever happened. But I knew better. I knew the moment I stepped back into that house, I'd be right back where I started. Helpless. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder if she even realized how much damage she'd done. Did she know the weight of her words? Did she understand that calling me useless wasn't just a passing comment, but a reflection of how little she thought of me? How long had she felt this way? I pulled out my phone, staring at it for a long moment. There it was, her name. The last message I'd ignored. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to tell her what I was feeling, to let her know how hurt I was. But I stopped myself. She wasn't asking for my feelings. She was asking for control, for things to go back to how they were. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. So I put the phone down, watching the screen go dark. For the first time, I realized I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her validation. I needed to find out who I was again, outside of everything she had expected of me. The next morning, I finally replied. One sentence. "I'm done." And just like that, everything I had been holding on to slipped away. The fear, the guilt, the hope that things might change, it all disappeared in an instant. I didn't feel a rush of relief, but I did feel something else. I felt lighter. The text was sent. "I'm done." It was simple, direct, and final. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I hadn't been expecting a rush of satisfaction or relief. But there was something liberating about taking control of my own life for once, something I hadn't done in years. I didn't hear from Grace for the rest of the night, and honestly, it felt like the first real peace I'd had in ages. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to smile and act like everything was fine when it wasn't. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of a failing marriage on my shoulders. The next morning, I woke up to the usual barrage of messages from her. But this time, they weren't just apologetic. They were desperate. "Please don't leave me," she begged. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'll change." I stared at my phone, wondering if I should respond. The old me would have been swayed by her words, by her tears, by the promises of change. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't the one who put my happiness last, who sacrificed my dignity just to keep the peace. I deleted her messages, one by one. It felt oddly satisfying to not even consider going back, to not even entertain the idea of fixing things. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't just one argument, one mistake. This was the result of years of neglect, of resentment building up quietly until it finally spilled over in the most destructive way possible. I took a walk through the park that afternoon, the cold air nipping at my face, trying to clear my head. People passed by, living their lives, oblivious to the storm that had just hit mine. I had always been so wrapped up in my relationship with Grace, so focused on her needs, that I'd forgotten how to exist outside of it. That was the hardest part. Finding myself again. For so long, I had been defined by my role as her husband, by the expectations she had placed on me. But now, I had no role. I was just me, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure who that even was. As I sat on a bench by the pond, watching the ducks lazily float by, I thought about what I wanted out of life. Not for Grace, not for anyone else. Just for me. I wanted peace. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be happy. I didn't need her to complete me. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I thought back to when I first met Grace, how full of promise our relationship had seemed. We were a team back then, or at least, I thought we were. But over the years, we had become strangers in the same house. She had stopped seeing me, and I had stopped seeing myself. The text from her buzzed again. "I'm sorry," it said. "I don't want to lose you. I love you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because I realized that, somewhere along the way, I had stopped loving her. Not in the way I used to, not in a healthy, mutual way. It was more like I had been holding on to the idea of her, the potential of what we could be. But that idea had crumbled, just like everything else. For the next few days, I did nothing. I didn't contact Grace. I didn't try to fix things. I just existed, trying to figure out what I wanted next. I knew I couldn't go back to the person I was before. I had to change, or at least figure out who I really was without her. I took a long drive the following weekend, heading out of town. I didn't know where I was going, but I felt like I needed to get away from everything, from Grace, from the life we had built, from the weight of those words she had said. It felt like the only way to move forward was to disconnect completely. As I drove through the countryside, the wide-open roads felt symbolic of the freedom I had found. I was no longer tethered to someone who had dismissed me so easily. I was free, but I couldn't shake the thought of Grace, of what was left of her and I. What happens when the dust settles? What happens when the aftermath of everything I had heard and done finally hits? When I stopped for gas, I checked my phone. There was a new message from Grace. "I don't understand. Please, come back." But I didn't feel the tug of guilt anymore. I felt pity, maybe even a little sadness. But no guilt. I replied, but this time, it was different. "I'm not coming back, Grace. You've made your feelings clear. It's over." And with that, I felt something I hadn't expected, a sense of finality, of closure. This time, there was no going back. No more pretending, no more hoping. It was done. The days after I sent that final message felt surreal. It wasn't just the silence that hung between us. It was the weight of knowing that I had finally taken control of my own life, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. The life I had shared with Grace for so long seemed so distant now, like a faded memory, and I was struggling to adjust to this new reality. For the first time in ages, I had no schedule to follow, no one to check in with, no obligations. It felt both freeing and empty, and I wasn't sure which one I felt more strongly. I didn't reach out to Grace, not once. She had sent countless messages after that last exchange, but I ignored them all. "I need you," one message said. "This isn't us," said another. But each time I saw her words on my screen, I felt nothing but a cold distance. I found myself staying out late, taking long walks in the evening when the streets were empty, when no one was around to see me. I needed to be alone. I needed to feel what it was like to exist without the constant pressure of trying to be someone I wasn't. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I was determined to find out. One night, a week after I had left, I ran into an old friend from high school, Ben. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I saw him on the street, he stopped and waved, clearly surprised to see me. "Hey man, long time no see," he said with a grin. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, it's been a while. Ben looked me up and down, then raised an eyebrow. You all right? You look different. I shrugged, not knowing how to explain. Just going through some stuff. He didn't push. Instead, he invited me to grab a drink. At first, I hesitated. I hadn't really felt like socializing, but something in his tone made me agree. Maybe it was the loneliness, the silence that had been smothering me. I needed something, anything, to distract me from the constant thoughts running through my head. We went to a small bar near the downtown area, and as we sat down with our drinks, Ben asked about my life. I hesitated at first. How could I explain the mess I was in? The unraveling of my marriage. The devastation I had felt from hearing the woman I loved call me useless. I took a deep breath and began. It's complicated. My wife. I overheard her talking, and, well, things fell apart. Ben listened carefully, not interrupting, letting me speak. When I was done, he let out a low whistle. Man, that's tough. But hey, you did the right thing. No one should be treated like that. You can't keep giving everything to someone who doesn't even appreciate it. His words struck a chord in me, more than I wanted to admit. For so long, I had questioned my actions. Had I done the right thing? Was walking away the right decision? But hearing Ben say it aloud made something click inside me. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the one who had changed. I guess I needed someone to tell me that, I said quietly. Ben nodded. Sometimes, we're too close to the situation to see it clearly. But yeah, man, you did what you had to do. And now, it's about figuring out what comes next. What came next? That was the question that haunted me every day. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. Was I supposed to try and rebuild a life without Grace? Could I even picture a future without her in it? For the next few days, I tried to focus on anything but her. I kept busy, worked out more, even started reading books I had neglected for years. It wasn't easy. The silence between Grace and me was deafening. And the worst part was the guilt. Not because I thought I had done something wrong, but because I wasn't sure how long I could keep up the facade of being okay. Then, a few days later, I got a call. I didn't recognize the number. At first, I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hello, I said, my voice hoarse. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then I heard her voice, Grace. I've been trying to reach you, she said, her voice shaky. Please, just talk to me. I know I messed up, but you can't just shut me out like this. Please, I need you to listen. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, tell her everything I had been holding inside. But the other part, the part that still cared for her, wanted to hear her out, to see if she was really sorry. But I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to be the man I was before, the one who let her words define him. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to being that version of myself. I don't think I can do this anymore, Grace, I said finally. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it isn't. It's over. Her voice broke. Please don't do this. I can change. I'll do whatever it takes. But I knew it was too late. The damage had already been done. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. The words she had begged me to hear echoed in my mind, but I didn't let them sink in. I'll do whatever it takes, she had pleaded. But it was too late for promises. It was too late for empty words. She had broken something in me, and now, I could feel the pieces falling into place. I wasn't the same person anymore. I let the silence settle, the kind that leaves you with 1,000 unspoken words. Grace had been a huge part of my life, and despite everything, there was still a part of me that longed to fix it, to rewind time and undo the hurt. But deep down, I knew the truth. What we had was gone. The next morning, I woke up to more messages. They weren't just apologies anymore. They were desperate pleas. Please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll do whatever you want. But I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in my head that said I had heard this before. I spent the next few days distracted, trying to distract myself. I went on long drives, found new places to explore, and avoided any space that reminded me of Grace. But it was impossible to fully escape. The memories crept back, and so did the questions. Could we have fixed this? Should I have tried harder? It wasn't until I ran into her again that everything came crashing down. It wasn't planned. I had no intention of seeing her. But fate had other plans. I was grabbing a coffee at a local cafe when I saw her standing by the counter. She hadn't seen me yet, but I saw her. My heart stopped for a split second. She looked different, but the same. She was still Grace, the woman I had married. But there was a distance between us now, one that wasn't there before. I could feel it, even from across the room. She looked up and caught my eye. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, she started to approach me, hesitating, as if unsure of what to say. "Hi," she said softly, her voice almost fragile. I nodded, but I didn't speak right away. The tension was palpable. What was there left to say? Everything had already been said, and yet, there was still this nagging pull to engage, to see if there was any way to fix this. But I couldn't. I had already made my decision. "You look good," she said, trying to break the silence, but the words fell flat. "Thanks," I replied, my voice distant. She winced at the coldness in my tone, but pressed on. "I didn't mean what I said, you know. I didn't mean it." I was frustrated, and I lashed out. "You're not useless. I never thought that. Please, I need you to understand that." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long while. Her eyes were pleading, but I saw something else too, guilt. And I didn't know if I could trust it anymore. I had heard the same things before, the same apologies, the same promises to change. But it was too late for that. Too late for words. "You've had your chances, Grace," I said quietly. "I don't believe you anymore. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when I know it's not. When I know you don't see me, don't respect me the way I deserve." Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I had once loved. But it was gone as quickly as it came. The reality had set in. She wasn't the person I had married anymore. And I wasn't the person I had been either. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't even close. "I know," I said, "but it's time for both of us to move on." She stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and regret, but I couldn't let myself be swayed. I had come too far. "I'm done, Grace," I said, turning to walk away. For the first time, I didn't look back. The first few days after that final confrontation with Grace felt like a blur. I had expected some kind of relief, but what I got was an eerie emptiness that filled every corner of my life. The house, which once felt like home, now felt like a shell. The air felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were mourning what had been lost. I had always imagined that when things ended, there would be this moment of clarity, some sort of profound realization that everything was going to be okay. But there was none of that. Just the haunting silence. I spent my days trying to keep busy. Work had never been more distracting. I threw myself into projects, tasks, meetings, anything to avoid going back to the house. I couldn't bring myself to face the empty rooms, the once shared spaces now filled with nothing but memories. It was like stepping into a museum of my own failures, a place where every object reminded me of how far I'd fallen. But even though I was physically away from her, the emotional weight of everything still clung to me. It felt impossible to untangle. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that moment. Her face, the pleading in her voice, the words she had said that haunted me. "You're useless." And no matter how many times I told myself I was better off, I couldn't shake the feeling of being betrayed. I tried to push forward. I forced myself to go out, to talk to friends, to put on a brave face. But I wasn't fooling anyone. Ben, who I had met the other day, had invited me out a few more times, but even he saw through it. "Man, I can tell you're not okay," he said one night, after I had downed my third drink and laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know. You've been through something big." I stared at my glass, swirling the ice cubes around. "I know," I said quietly. I don't know how to deal with it. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought she'd see me, you know, that she'd appreciate me, that it would be enough." Ben raised an eyebrow. "That's the problem, man. You were trying to be enough for her. But what about you? When was the last time you did something just for you?" That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't even realized how much of myself I had given away. I had been so focused on being what Grace wanted, on meeting her needs, on keeping her happy, that I had forgotten about my own happiness. I had let myself shrink into a role, a shadow of the person I used to be. For the first time, I felt the truth of his words. I hadn't lived for me in years. And now, with everything shattered, I had no idea who I was anymore. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to find a way to move forward, even if it meant facing the pain head on. Even if it meant completely reworking my life, one broken piece at a time. The next day, I woke up early, drove out to the park, and sat there in the stillness. I needed space. I needed time to think. I was finally letting go of the past, but the future felt uncertain, like staring into a fog. And for the first time, I wasn't sure where I was going, but that didn't scare me anymore. The idea of rediscovering myself, of rebuilding my life from the ground up, felt like a challenge I wasn't going to shy away from. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see Grace again. Maybe I would. Maybe she'd come looking for answers, for closure, or to try and fix things again. But I knew I wouldn't let her pull me back in. I had to do this for me. I stood up from the bench, feeling the chill in the air, and walked away. Each step felt like a small victory. I wasn't walking away from Grace. I was walking toward the person I had left behind, the person who had been buried under years of neglect and unspoken expectations. It was time to find myself again, and this time, I was going to do it for me. It had been several weeks since I last spoke to Grace. The pain of the breakup had slowly faded, replaced with a new sense of purpose. I had kept myself busy, focusing on rebuilding my life, something I hadn't done in years. I started taking care of myself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I worked out more, started picking up old hobbies I had long neglected, and even reconnected with old friends. I was finally learning to live for myself. The days became easier, and I could feel myself healing piece by piece. I wasn't thinking about Grace as much. I wasn't haunted by her words anymore. Instead, I found myself looking forward to the future, something I hadn't done in a long time. I began seeing a therapist, someone I trusted to help me sort through the lingering feelings I had about my marriage and the betrayal I'd experienced. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One afternoon, as I was having lunch with Ben at a local cafe, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Hey, it's Grace. I need to talk to you. I made a huge mistake." I stared at the message, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I expected, but certainly not this. My first reaction was a mix of anger and disgust. How dare she? After everything she had done, after calling me useless, after pushing me to the edge, now she wanted to apologize? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I put my phone down and looked at Ben. He could see the expression on my face and raised an eyebrow. "She's back, huh?" he said, his tone neutral. "Yeah," I said, shaking my head. "She wants to talk." I don't know why I'm even surprised, but something about it just doesn't sit right. Ben shrugged. "You don't owe her anything, man. You've moved on. Don't let her mess with your head again." I knew he was right. I had done the hard work of letting go, of finding peace without her. But part of me still wanted to hear what she had to say, wanted to understand if she was really sorry or just regretting losing control. I took a deep breath and decided to call her. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew it would be a conversation that would close the door for good. When she picked up, I could hear the strain in her voice. "Hey," she said, almost nervously. "I'm sorry for everything. I messed up. I wasn't myself. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, disbelief, even pity, but I knew better than to let her see it. I had to be calm, collected. "You really think an apology changes anything? After everything you've put me through?" She stammered, but I could hear her desperation. "I never meant to hurt you. Everything got so overwhelming. I took you for granted, and now I realize it was wrong." I exhaled sharply. "Grace, I don't need your apology. I needed your respect. I needed you to see me, to value me when it mattered. But you didn't. You made me feel useless. You pushed me away. I'm not coming back. I'm not doing this again." Her voice faltered. "But I still love you, I interrupted her before she could finish. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The version of me that was willing to sacrifice everything for you. But I'm not that person anymore. And honestly, it's too little, too late." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear her breathing, heavy with regret. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could pull me back in with her words. I had moved on. I was no longer defined by her love, or lack thereof. "I think you should just let it go, Grace," I said firmly. "I've let it go, and it's time for you to do the same." I hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I could feel a weight lift off my shoulders as I stood up from the table, a quiet sense of victory settling inside me. I had taken control. I had walked away, rebuilt myself, and now I was stronger than ever. The rest of the day felt lighter. I didn't feel burdened by the past anymore. I had learned that walking away from someone who didn't value you wasn't weakness, it was strength. And with every passing day, I felt more at peace with my decision. As for Grace, I never heard from her again. Maybe she realized I wasn't going to play along with her games anymore. Or maybe she just gave up. But I like to think that the universe has a way of giving people what they deserve. Karma, in its own quiet way, had taken care of things. Grace never found the happiness she was looking for, because sometimes, when you push people to the brink, they don't come back. And me? I was finally free. Free to be myself. Free to chase what made me happy. And for the first time in years, I was excited about the future. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living.